My brother moved out of the house back in 2002 once he got his job as a computer technician, and he recently went missing. When I went to his house, it was locked with 3 sheets of printer paper taped to the front door. Winter coming home from work one day, I noticed someone had left their damaged plain gray laptop lying in the middle of the driveway. I got out of the car to examine it more carefully. The LCD definitely showed signs of user-related damage. There was a large hole on the left side of the screen, what appeared to be a fit of standard Phillips head screwdriver perfectly. There was a webcam above the display, and there was also destroyed with what looked like to be a screwdriver. Other than those, everything else on the computer showed minor signs of wear. Almost all the keyboard's keys were faded, but not the extent that the laptop could be considered unusable. I looked at the back of the display to find out what brand it was, but I couldn't find anything. I looked at the entire laptop shell, but there was no text or logo. In fact, there was no warranty sticker, no proof of license, notice on the bottom, no text whatsoever. What was even then more odd was that the fact that the only ports on the thing were a VGA port for connecting external display and a USB port. How long could this laptop have possibly run without a charging port to power the battery? It must have been a very low-end laptop where you had to remove the battery pack and put it on its own charging dock. Why did it have a webcam though? Curious as to what was on the laptop, I ran inside to my basement where my old desktop was currently being stored. The reason it was being down here was because I forgot to bring that behemoth to the local Star can to recycle it. I would have been using it as my regular computer, but it takes 5 to 6 hours to fully boot because the system always goes through recovery mode each time you start it, and the procedure is way too slow to recover. Everything on the 500 gigabyte hard drive I had installed on it, a 120 MHz Pentium procedure doesn't get you very far. I removed the old LG CRT monitor from the desktop and plugged it into the laptop. I went to push the power button when I stopped. There was no way this was going to work. The battery may have been dead by now. I rummaged through the basement to find a battery voltage tester, then immediately withdrew the battery from the laptop and checked the voltage. Lo and behold, it had no charge. Well, I thought I might as well just leave it and take everything to Sarcan tomorrow morning. With that, I unplugged the display from the laptop and put it back on the desktop, and simply left everything downstairs. After leaving the basement, I went to watch TV for about 3 hours or so, before going to bed. I was suddenly awakened from the deep slumber by the sound of the Windows 2000 startup jingle, and fell out of my bed. It was so deafening and loud, I swore someone was holding a pair of speakers right next to my ears. I stood up in a groggy state and took a couple of minutes to figure out what that sound was. The desktop. I must have accidentally hit the power button while trying to switch the monitors. I headed to the basement but froze in the middle of the steps. I just remember there was no way my computer would have started up, because I have Windows 95 installed on my desktop. I was reluctant to go downstairs steps after that, but my common sense started kicking, and I thought I must be getting my OCs messed up. When I walked down, I was shocked to see that my desktop wasn't on. In fact, I remember it wasn't even plugged in. I had to make sure of it though, and I checked behind the desktop. Everything else was plugged in, all except for power. There was absolutely no chance of that laptop turning on. It was impossible. I removed the battery from the laptop again and rechecked the voltage. This time I couldn't get a direct number. The voltage tester was just going insane. I reinserted the battery and pressed over the power button on the laptop. Some indicator lights flashed, meaning that the computer was definitely started, except this time the startup jingle wasn't played at all. I needed to see what was going on there. I connected the CRT monitor back onto the laptop, and what I saw was a bare desktop with 3 icons in the corner. The taskbar was empty and there was no start menu button. The wallpaper was all black, Why would anyone do this to their laptop? Anyone could remove all the icons, but they had to be pretty skilled hackers to remove the start menu button. One of the free icons was a games folder. One was videos folder and the other one was DOS command prompt program. Maybe this was a kid's laptop? Clicking on the games folder contained my suspicions. A little girl must have owned this laptop. I felt some remorse for the poor little girl, because there was only one game in the folder. The program name was Princess.exe. I clicked on it just to see what the game was like, and a fully animated title screen popped up with various genetic fairy tale princesses twirling across the screen, and then the logo flew down to a bunch of sparkly doves holding it. The game was called Princess Creator, Make Yourself Beautiful. Ah, so this must have been one of those low-budget, put PNG of various clothing items into a photo of yourself games. I was right as the menu popped up, and I was given the option to dress up or have a few pretty pictures. I wanted to see what the girl looked like, so I then clicked on the second option. She had to be no more than 5, and on top of that, she looked very cute. She was either Mexican or Spanish origin. She wore somewhat of a tattered white dress with small red frills around the sleeves and collar. It even had small roses on it. It smiled. As she looked, she had a lot of fun putting a viral tiara on her head. However, though, through the photos, about halfway through there were pictures of the room with nothing else but a bedside inside. She must have been dodging the camera for the hell out of it, I guess. After that, I felt that I'd soon had enough of that program and may as well look in the other 2 full files on the laptop. I decided to go to Command Prop to see if I could locate the other files on the hard drive. I simply got a line with no drive letter. Okay, this is really strange, I thought. I typed into the command box Start C to see if I could open any directory I wanted to explore. I pressed enter and DOS simply read Start and is not recognized as an external or internal hard command, operatable program or batch file. After a few seconds, the program crashed, bringing me to the desktop. So I guess the last thing to look at was the videos. I double-clicked the folder and the screen faded to black. I thought it crashed, but I noticed that there were small blank flashing at the top left corner. Suddenly the text Start Videos 001 WMV flashed briefly, then a video appeared in full screen. It was the girl again. This time she was smiling, bouncing slightly with excitement. Her happiness made my heart feel warm. My guess is that she must have been recording herself playing dress-up game with the webcam. At first she was simply moving her fingers across the trackpad, clicking and giggling excitedly for a bit. She must have been laughing at all the things she put on herself in the game. After about 2 minutes or so, the screen then cut to black for a fraction of a second, and then returned to the girl playing the game. This time, however, she was dressed differently. A simple pink t-shirt with the words, "Go, go, girl," stitched in glitter. I guess the game was recording her every time she played it, without her knowing. That made me sort of uneasy. I mean, why would anyone program a game to do that? Whatever, I guessed it. It was going to be the same sort of thing over and over with the video, so I may as well have turned off the computer. I reached over and pressed the power button, and it didn't shut off this time. The video continued to play, and I saw the girl this time was wearing an orange tank top with nothing on it. She was smiling and giggling as usual, and I thought maybe I could just turn the computer off after the video was done. It couldn't be that long. The video seemed to drag on with more cuts of her playing the game on a different outfit. I started to doze off. However, after the next cut in the video, the girl was just staring at the camera with the expressionless look on her face, wondering what the hell was going on. I became interested in the video again. This one didn't make me smile. It made me extremely uneasy to watch, without her unusually smiling face on. It was dark in the room, but there was one desk light in the side. She was some sort of nightwear. What was she going to do? She was just going to sat there for a minute with a blank expression. She wasn't thinking at all. We started to get really tense, as if something awful was about to happen. As she bent over and picked up the handsaw from the left side of where she was sitting, she held it in front of her, showing it to the camera. And then she placed a jagged blade on the side of her cheek. I cringed at what I was seeing. Slowly she began slicing her right cheek. Blood drizzled down her neck as she did it. The side of her teeth then began to show after about 10 seconds. As the saw went through the lower down her face, more of her teeth began to show on the side. Blood covered most of the entire right side of her face. She eventually got to the bottom of her jawbone and saw a tiny piece off of it too. Her cheek fell to the ground with a small thud, and she put the saw in her lap and continued to stare at the camera motionless. I couldn't take much more of this and tore the battery out of the laptop, but the video continued to play. Then the next cut began and the girl screamed in extreme pain. I almost fell out of my seat, it was so loud. She screamed and put her hands over her now absent cheek. She continued to scream in agony for about 10 seconds. Then a knocking was heard from the side. It was a woman yelling in a language that I couldn't understand. She was pounding on the door but not opening it. The girl must have locked it. I tried to unplug the monitor from the laptop, but it was stuck in, and I didn't want to see what happened next. The screaming and the yelling soon turned it up into the next cut. She was back in her motionless state again, but her cheek was missing. The woman at the door was pounding and yelling still. It could have been her mother. The girl then raised the saw up to her right shoulder and began cutting just as slowly as last time. I gagged at the sight of this. It was a holocaust of wrong. The blood began to stream out in all directions. The yelling behind the door fell silent. I guess the other woman was trying to get someone to help her. Either it was her father or brother or whatnot. She then hit the bone and an awful grinding noise can be heard. I covered my ears, but I could still hear vividly through my hands. I noticed a piece of her muscle got stuck on one of the steel teeth of the saw. This cut ended a lot faster than before, and the next was the same thing, except the color from her face was draining, and her pain-ridden screams became quickly weaker. Her clothing was completely red, with blood on the right side. She then became motionless again. Oh God, what was she going to cut off next? Her mother turned with what sounded like 2 other people, and they were all yelling in the same language as before. She raised with the saw and began cutting the right side of her head off. Loud thuds were pounding on the door. They were trying to knock it down. She continued to work on her way of her own, with blood going down all sorts of directions. The thuds still repeated themselves on the door. I was mostly confused now of how she kept going. Even after she went through her brain with the saw, her right eye rolled into the back of her head. Blood began leaking out of it. She eventually made it to the top of her mouth, where she hacked away through her bones and teeth. It was the single worst sound I have ever heard in my entire life. I could still hear it at the back of my head some days. The thuds continued, deep in the back of my mind. I hoped they wouldn't be able to break the door down, so they wouldn't have to see such an awful sight. She finally made it through, and with that, the right side of her head fell to the side of her neck, held on to only a piece of skin. I remember the chilling sound of her jaw being unhinged when it was tugged violently by the force of the top half of her head. She put the saw down to the side. The cut ended, and then the next, she simply fell face down onto the desk. Half of her brain fell out onto the impact, and her eye popped out of its socket. Blood pooled on the desk. The people trying to break down the door finally made it in, and they were hysterical at what they saw. Their daughter was in pieces. The mother vomited and ran out of the room. The father ran to the daughter and put her head back together and cried, holding her at the head of the side of his. The other man, presumably the girl's older brother, simply stared in horror at what he saw. The horrifying self-mutilation finished with that cut, and the screen cut back into the empty room with the bed. With a sigh of relief that it was over, I sat there, breathing heavily and sweating. I didn't realize that the room was so hot until now. I had so many questions to ask. How was all this possible? It frightened me, and I spent a good 30 minutes sitting on the chair. Finally got the courage to get up. I looked back at the laptop and for hope what's the last time, the room with the bed glared on the screen. It then cut to something else. It was a cut of my face in the basement, using the laptop. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.